Yep.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 18 of the Complete Game with Gehrig and Curt Schilling. What's up, G?
What's going on, everybody?
How you doing, bud?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm good. Lots of pitching to talk about today. We're gonna jump right into it. We talked the other day about young pitchers,
Mick
and
Abel.
you had mentioned Mick Abel for the Phillies, and he made his debut today against Paul Skenes. And how did that go?
Went pretty good for the kid.
He
Went
was
six strong with 5 hits, no earned runs, 9 Ks. And going against Skenes, welcome to the show,
for
buddy.
Paul Skenes.
Yeah.
Skenes shows a complete game, 1 run, punches out 9, throws the gem. Gives up a run and loses 1-0, falls to I think 3-5 with a 2.4 ERA. So uh,
Through no fault of his own.
no, he's stuck where he's stuck. But Abel was good. We'll talk about the outing. And one of the challenges, and you had mentioned to me, G, one of the challenges here. I don't want to be that guy when it comes to but I look at everything from a detail oriented minutia perspective. So I had watched video of Abel at double A, triple A, and then here's a guy, I think he had something close to 80 walks last year in 130 minor league innings. Clearly, excuse me, someone who still needs polish, got a couple hundred innings in the minor leagues. So let's celebrate the day. He'll never forget it. He punched out the first guy he faced. His family's in the stand. Just some great memories, and I can't. I, it's something I remember vividly. I certainly didn't throw that good of a game my first start, but it was a win, and you never forget it. You remember everything about it, and it's certainly a phenomenal outing. But from a pitcher's perspective, as I looked in detail and watched the game, I noticed some things, and Gehrig, we'll link some of the highlights. And there's a couple different pitches and again, this is nitpicky in a sense, but there's a bigger underlying picture. And the overall message is he's in the big leagues before he should be, but his stuff plays, right? Excuse me, far better slider than I ever had. Upper 90s velocity, which is going to allow him, the strike zone we talked about, expanding and shrinking in areas based on velocity. He's an upper 90s guy, but he's also a max effort guy. And I hate to see that. And it gets back to what we're seeing sport wide is a love affair with velocity. And velocity has always been a big thing. But today it's an unhealthy relationship in the sense that, you've got these things like drive line pitching and other, we'll teach you to throw 98. We'll get you more velocity. And you're seeing the result is and you went to one of these camps, G. Talk about your experience there. Because again, I understand what they're doing because they've understood that the transition of baseball to velocity has created throwers who are going to get drafted who otherwise, they'll get drafted high where they otherwise might be fringe picks. But you went down to one of these camps.
Yeah, I went to a pitching clinic camp sort of ranch down in Texas for a summer, and it was just like that, like a pitching cattle zone. And a lot of the emphasis, and especially for me, because my bigger thing was I wasn't a velocity guy. I never reached back for it, really. It was always about command. But most of the training we got there was about getting 1 or 2 ticks, as you said last week, the new terminology they use now for baseball. But not a lot of it is about sequencing and situational
Pitching. It wasn't about pitching.
Yeah.
It was about throwing as hard as you could throw.
Yeah, throwing camp is really what it is.
And that's resulted in two things. The increased velocity and overall in Major League Baseball, which it's up, but it's also had a far bigger impact on the health of these pitchers. And none of that is good. My argument is, as an organization, you have to roll back the clock. Sabermetrics and all those things, factor them in. I totally buy into a lot of that stuff. But these pitchers are not ready to pitch in the big leagues before they're being called up. And it used to be you used to come up as a starter from the minor leagues. You would go to the bullpen and get a couple low leverage innings in situations, get your feet wet, and then you might get a start, blah, blah, blah. these kids are being thrown right into the starting rotation in the big leagues. And I watched, there's a couple strikeouts to pay attention to from Abel today. There was a pitch in the highlights I saw, it was the fourth strikeout. Catcher sets it, by the way, and I don't know who it was behind the plate today. I don't know if it was Real Muto or the other kid, but he did a phenomenal job. Balls up at bottom of the zone. He was bringing into the zone comfortably, getting called strikes. They were strikes anyway, but there's a couple pitches. And if you watch, like I said, if you're watching the game and you want to understand how I watch the game, watch where the catcher sets up and watch where the result is. Remember we talked about yesterday or the last episode, guy in that bottom corner, those corner boxes where you set up down there and you reach across the plate. Bad miss, useless miss, all the things go with that. There were a couple strikeouts where, and he's going to get those at times for the rest of his career because of his stuff. When you do that 97, you do get swings and misses. But what's going to happen is the video on him is going to very quickly show that as a hitter, I don't have to hunt. Well, here's the analogy. Guys knew I was going to throw a fastball down and away for the most part, but I was going to do it in a way that you really couldn't do a lot unless you were looking to hit the ball to the right side. Not a lot of hitters do that anymore. So you're gonna be able to hunt the fastball off him till you get 2 strikes, because there's just as likely a chance he'll throw one middle as they'll paint the corner. That's not a good thing for hitters because they want to be, and that's an even worse thing for pitchers. His stuff will play. He may go the whole year and have a great run and be 8-1 with a 2.4. I would bet against it, unfortunately. And again, I'm not rooting against this kid. I want to see all these pitchers do well. But from a pitching coach perspective, I'm looking at he's not set up for long-term success. He's not going to go out and have a bad day where he battles and goes 5 and gives up 5 hits and 2 runs and strikes some guys out in tough situations and throws 100 pitches like Chase Dollander did today, which we'll get to. But his outings are going to be 2 1/3, 6 walks, the bad ones. You're going to have no chance to win, and 100% not his fault. And again, it's hard to come off of that outing with anything, but I'm looking under the numbers, and what I saw was a kid with a phenomenal arm who's just not ready to pitch.
Rafael Marchand was the kid.
Okay. The kid behind the plate was very, very good today, and but the positives, right? This is a Hall of Fame level arm. This is a top of the rotation arm. This is, my God, if Nola's healthy and right behind Wheeler and Nola, look out. Big league slider, plus slider with downward action, consistent downward action. But if you watch the delivery and you watch the finish, this is a max effort kid who is a straight at the end, straight up. He throws from straight up. And, the analogy I try to use a lot of times is, if you take a guy, if you're throwing darts and you're throwing them this way, you're going to be a lot less accurate than if you throw them that way. And pitching is the same way. So again, great outing, 1-0. Sorry, Paul Skenes. But that was fun to watch, and I'm happy for him. Along those same lines in Pittsburgh, talking about Paul Skenes, Jared Jones. Now, and this will be true forever. I've said it forever. It will be true forever. You never, ever have a positive result when you have someone that has a strained elbow. And for those of you that don't understand the medicine behind a strain, while sounding innocent, represents tear. A strain is a tear. It is a slight to a significant tear. When you sprain your ankle, you tear tissue. When you strain your elbow, you tear tissue. When you have that in your elbow, rest is never, ever the answer. It doesn't ever work. And Jared Jones went down early in the spring, strained elbow. And today news comes out that he's going to be re-examined. What's going to happen is Jared Jones is going to have Tommy John surgery at some point in the very near future that he could have already been 3 to 4 months in rehabbing. So you might miss all of next year, as opposed to getting him back at the end of next year and getting him going. And I just think I've never seen it work. It doesn't work. You can't rest torn elbow ligaments, strained elbow ligaments, and have them be okay. He's going to get reevaluated. He hasn't even started pitching yet. So unfortunately, and Jared Jones was legit and is legit. He's a number 2 guy behind Skenes in Pittsburgh. And I know they were counting on him to be that guy, but I think they're now 15-32. So Unfortunately, another organization, in my opinion, that needs to bring somebody in top down and redress their pitching organizational.
But at least to contradict what we've been talking about with the Rockies, like at least this is what you're talking about, right? Like these are the right type of guys you want to build a rotation around.
Exactly right. Every one of these guys, yeah.
Like apply this to the Rocky situation, right? If you're getting these guys 6 years, right? Like that's a dream scenario if you're rebuilding a franchise
Right.
like the Pirates or the Rockies or the White Sox or some of these franchises.
Exactly right. The unfortunate part is based on where they are right now, for them to develop, they're going to become the guys you want them to become at the end of that 6-year window, right before they walk.
Yeah.
What you want is to come up to the big leagues in that September call up, which you get 32 days of service time. And then you have them for 6 years and 32 days, because the next year they start in the big leagues and they get 6 years of club control. But all of the work, if you're drafting these kids and looking at the kid, like, well, let's go back to Dollander. Dollander pitched today. Rockies lost 1-0. So you're assuming that he threw really, really well. He threw 4 2/3 innings. He gave up 3 hits, walked 2, struck out 6, 1 earned run. But it took him 98 pitches to do it. And I'm watching the last inning, and he's 3-2, 3-2, 3-1, 3-2. And he's getting chased on pitches. He's going to not get chased. But it goes back to, I want this kid to Merrill Kelly. He faced Merrill Kelly, who isn't a high 90s Hall of Fame caliber arm guy. Kelly goes 7 on a hit, 3 walks, 11 punch outs, no runs. He's 5-2 with a 3.26. Merrill Kelly's not a power arm. He's a pitcher.
Yeah.
Zach Gallen
showed it throughout that postseason run for that.
Exactly right.
Poise.
Yep.
Collect it. Like he was never a guy that you were reaching back and hearing the tennis grunt from, but consistent.
But when Merrill Kelly reaches back to add 3 or 4 miles an hour, it makes a difference.
A huge difference,
right,
as opposed to the 1 mile an hour that the top end guys every time are getting.
Exactly right. So, and who was the kid we talked? Palmquist was the kid the other day, right?
Carson Palmquist.
Yes, yeah. Carson Palmquist, who went 4, gave up 6 runs, got a loss. And the big thing I came out of that with was he went 4-6. I think he only gave up 3 runs or 4 runs, maybe, whatever. He walked 1 and struck out none. And I'm watching the video of this kid, and again, another thrower. That's probably the first outing in his life at any level ever that he didn't record a strikeout. And those are the kind of things that jump out to you as a pitcher. After I remember at a point in my career where I had a pitcher with 2 strikes, and I couldn't make him swing and miss. And I realized in my head, okay, life is different for me now. I have to change my approach because I clearly can't make guys who I should be able to swing and miss anymore. These guys have never had that conversation with themselves because they've always had swing and miss stuff. And if you're a Rockies fan, what I'm trying to tell you is you've got 2 guys who are top of the rotation arms. They should not be in Colorado right now. They're not learning anything. And, you can make the argument, send it back to, you sit them down and say, hey, listen, you're going back to Colorado Springs. You're going back to AAA. None of this is your fault. None of this is your fault. You're not ready to pitch here, and that's on us. So you're going to go back to AAA. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what it's going to. When you come back here, you're staying for the rest of the time because you'll be ready to pitch at that point. And you get somebody down there who will put their hands on them and explain to them how to pitch in the big leagues, what it means to be max effort is only something you do, rare times in a game. Every other pitch is a pitch. It's a feel, and seeing them without that finish to me is frustrating. But again, 2 big league arms and potentially top of the rotation starters who I don't think are going to be and aren't learning anything. They're not going. This is not a learning environment. The big leagues isn't a place to learn unless you're the 5th guy as a young kid in a rotation coming up to the big leagues. Your team's set. Merrill or Mick Abel's in a situation where he can learn in the sense he's got Zach Wheeler and these guys ahead of him. But you've got to,
and it's not as much pressure, right? Because they're in a better spot than those other.
Well, it's more pressure in the sense that Abel's pitching for a team in contention.
They're meaningful stuff,
right?
But also like the whole team. It's sort of, at least from my experience being around you guys in a group that wins like the Phillies do, as opposed to the Rockies or Whites. there is a little bit more of like, hey, it's all right, kid. Like, we'll get them next time. You
Right.
got 20 more of these. Like, it's not as big a deal. Like, I imagine that if Mick Abel has a start similar to Carson Palmquist, that it's not as quiet a locker room as Carson Palmquist. But
Well, and the other thing is he can have a start like that and they can still win it.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And those are big. Those, and you don't know that when you're young, because when you're young, if you don't pitch well, you feel bad, regardless of the outcome, because you're not understanding at the point, hey, it doesn't matter what happens here as long as we win. You know, and I might mention too, the day before the Dollander start yesterday, the Rockies won 14-12. In a game, their starter went 2 1/3, and I mean, it's just it's tough, and I can't imagine for Rocky fans it's hard. And then again, a great fan base. They just want to see something that gives them hope and promise, which is why you're seeing these guys, and you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be seeing them yet, because the argument could be send them down to AAA, let them do their things at AAA, replace them with 2 starters. What's the worst that can happen? Are you going to lose more games? Excuse me. I mean, it is what it is. As a fan, I want to see a plan, a roadmap. And as a coach or someone, if you're running an organization top down, hey, listen, this is bad right now, but here's the things that are being put in place to make sure this ends soon and we never are here again. And that you've got to have those people, or you've got to have those people, because no one there can look at anybody and say, not my fault. Not everybody's accountable, and that's the way it should be, right? You know, ultimately, look at you talk about the general manager. Ultimately, he's the guy that takes responsibility for all of it, but he's got to trust in his head of scouting. He's got in this who has to trust in his scouts, who has to trust in all those things. Which, I guess if I'm looking from the top down, my question is, as I look at this team, is how did we get here? How did we get here? I mean, you had 2 Gold Glovers, and I'm skipping on his name, the center fielder for the Rockies. Find that out for me. Tovar, their shortstop, is a Gold Glover, and their center fielder was a Gold Glover. They were out early. Okay, they're out early, and they're last in defense. If those guys were not out early, what would they be? 28? That's still not okay. And things like that are and again, you don't want to go in. You can't fire everybody. You're not going to fire everybody because everybody's not bad at their jobs. But you can't be 8-38.
Brenton Doyle.
Doyle. There you go. Thank you, Brendan Doyle. You can't be 8-38. The players are responsible for your record, right? We'll go back to Dennis Greenfield. We are what our record says we are. The players are responsible. That doesn't mean they don't have some good players. I'm a fan of Hunter Goodman, who clearly, as a multi-position catcher, which is a rarity these days, which his other multi-position is outfield, which is even rarer. Kid knows how to catch, and all the things go with that. But is there a catching program set up at the base level of your organization when you draft? What are you looking for in your catchers? Because I need my catchers to get to the big leagues and be coaches. They need to be my 6th coach. I need to have them on the field, so I don't have to call a mound meeting every time I want to say something. My catcher knows what's going on. You have to draft and develop catchers along with the pitchers, and that starts in rookie ball. It starts in the draft with the conversations behind before you draft them. I mentioned something the other day too, and we'll get to it. We mentioned talking about the draft, and we're going to do that. I'm going to break down some guys' arms coming up in the draft and my thoughts about it. But one of the things you look for in catching is not physical tools. It's a discussion about baseball and baseball IQ and all those things. But one of the things that I feel like is overlooked and not appreciated is hand size. How big and it might sound like a trivial thing, but if you draft a pitcher with small hands, whatever his breaking ball is in college or high school is what it's going to be forever. Think about that. So I'm going to draft a guy who has an X breaking ball in college and he has small hands. That's his breaking ball. You have to be able to hold and manipulate the baseball in certain ways. And Pedro Martinez, if you looked at him, his arms were extremely long and his hands were almost as big as Randy Johnson's. Ben McDonald had monstrous hands. But every pitcher in the big leagues, for the most part, your hand size is going to play a massive part in your off-speed stuff, and it's going to be in your fastball too. Now, I have pretty big hands, but comparatively speaking, there are guys with a lot longer fingers and thinner fingers. But my hand size allowed me to throw a split, which ended up being my pitch. And the split fingered fastball, which is something I would almost teach every pitcher as a changeup. The easiest pitch in the world to teach and throw is the split fingered fastball. The only thing that will stop you is if you don't have the right hand size and finger length. I can't teach it to a guy and same thing goes with breaking balls. So hand size becomes one of those things that you get into the trenches and measure and get to know and all the other things. But you know, you look at I'll throw a name out there. Kyle Davies. He was a 10th, 15th round pick 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And I've mentioned his name because I was talking to someone who I trust as a baseball genius. And he was talking about Kyle Davies, how Kyle Davies had gotten drafted and he had no tangible thing. Not a big kid, 5'8", 5'10", didn't pop the gun. But the scout that drafted him, this gentleman I was talking to, after he saw him throw one time, he called the scout and he goes, talk to me about this kid. And he goes, well, why? He goes, because I love him. And he's like, oh, I thought you were going to go the other way with that. And he goes, no, everything. He's an athlete. He understands. He has a feel for pitching. And Kyle Davies got to the big leagues and had a good big league career. For a guy drafted in the 10th or 15th round, that's a huge win. That has to be, you have to have a draft of Kyle Davies in some of these organizations. You have to be able to get guys, and he wouldn't have been, Kyle Davies probably wouldn't have been touched today being drafted because he didn't do his spin rates and his exit velocity out of his hand and all these other things. But Kyle Davies had a feel for pitching. And baseball people can see that. It doesn't result in sabermetrics that jump out at you, and or sabermetrics that are even going to make you notice. But there's a piece of that other school that goes with sabermetrics. You have to be able to see these guys and know what you're seeing. And those guys are falling by the wayside now. And that's a shame. And what's that? No, I thought you were saying, I thought you had something. But that's what's being missed. And like I said, for velocity, there has never been a bigger, better time in Major League Baseball, but that has literally equaled nothing as its results to pitching results, and it's actually resulted in more injuries than we've ever seen, more Tommy Johns, and that's not going to change. Because if you're going to go and do what every other team does, which they're all doing, it's going to continue. If you're going, you got to be a team that jumps off this train and says, okay, this is not working. We need a reset. And, you know, this draft is your D-Day. This draft coming up, you have to go in with the mindset, I'm going to completely change some of the things that we think about and some of the approaches that we do with regards to pitching. Yeah, I'm going to look at spin rate and all those things because I do believe spin rate is kind of a telling thing. I do believe spin rate on breaking balls is a telling thing. But I also know that there are things that you can't tangibly measure. I have to put eyes on. I need to see. Are you an athlete? I played with some pitchers who were some of the worst athletes I've ever played with. And it showed up in their pitching. Because if you have guys with a feel for the game and a baseball IQ, you can fix their mechanics. You can make their mechanics big league worthy. And you can, it's almost, Gehrig, I've thought about this. Like, I'm almost thinking that I should open my own clinic that is literally the opposite of Driveline. It's a pitching clinic. If you throw 90, I can get you to the drafted, and I could get you the big leagues healthy. All the other stuff is on you.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people selling snake oil like that don't have your resume, so I don't see why you couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, in addition to all the other things I want to do,
yeah.
Right? But it's there. You can do it. And it can be done, but this revolution in velocity has been detrimental in so many ways to Major League pitching and the health of these kids. And that's not going to change because so many teams are caught up in it and they don't know how to get out of it. And there needs to be somebody I think somebody needs, what would be the harm if the Colorado Rockies said, you know what? Nothing we've ever done has resulted in us coming to the big leagues with a full 13-man staff that's capable of pitching in the big leagues in Colorado and the regular rest of the season. So, and here's the thing. You don't reinvent the wheel. You're not going to find guys who throw harder than anybody's ever thrown or any of those things. But you can reinvent the way you look at pitchers, amateur pitchers, and big league pitchers, how they evaluate in relations to where you are as a franchise, where you play your games as a franchise, and how you put your staffs together from rookie ball to the big leagues. Because I'm thinking through the minor leagues, I would have much bigger pitching staffs in all my minor league franchises for a Colorado or for any team that's, I mean, heck, we were talking about this the other. If I would ask you right now, who's the most disappointing team, the team with expectations that has utterly failed those expectations today, 50 games in, who would you say it was?
I mean, I cheated because we talked about this a little bit before, but I mean, it's obviously Baltimore.
Yeah.
We said early on it probably would have been the Braves, but they've started to come around.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, Baltimore is
The Braves without Acuna and Strider started 0-7 and found a way to get back. Schwellenbach's a stud. They're doing all the things they need to do. They're back at 500, although in that division, 500 is not going to do you much, but they're back in the game, right? Without those two guys, Strider's due back soon, and Acuna's going to be back, and all the things that go with that. Baltimore, 2 years ago, 101 wins?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. Last year, 93 wins.
93 wins.
And so everything pointed to, okay, this is just
they're building something.
Well, it was all done around young potential, right? It's like if you talk to old school baseball people, what is a baseball prospect? A baseball prospect is exactly that. He's a prospect. And I talk about that like from a GM perspective. When you're talking about trading players, when you trade prospects, you're trading a prospect. Yeah, he might be somebody, but Jackson Holliday was the #1 prospect the last 2 years. Last year was a nightmare. He's starting to come around. I think he's kind of found his footing, and that that should make people nervous with Gunnar Henderson and that whole Mayo and that whole slew of young prospects with Rushman and whatnot. But when you're looking at a team like the White Sox, they have Luis Roberts who really can't find his way, who is probably they traded Crochet and got whatever they could get maximum return wise. But if you're a team that is struggling at the bottom of your division, I think you have to look at this deadline and this draft as these are the 2 dates where I can start to turn around. But you can't do it with the same mentality you've gotten here with. You've got something has to change. And so the Orioles, I mean, it's just been Kyle Gibson. Wow. What did he go? 2/3 of an inning yesterday or something like that? 8, 6, 7, 8 runs.
Yep. And then Zach Eflin today,
Yeah.
6 runs in the first inning.
That's one of those.
Pitching, like all these other situations we're talking about.
It's just steamrolls too. It snowballs.
It's not that these guys don't have what you're talking about. They are obviously gifted from God to
Right.
have the ability they have. It's just the pitching part of it that's not coming together.
And you'd be surprised at how effective that downside is. It's like, oh no, here we go again with every hitter.
Oh, it's so corrosive I mean, to someone whose baseball career ended in college, that's exactly what it is. The mental head game of it, especially when you start to not pitch as much or you get moved to relief. I mean, it happens to every guy that plays baseball, unless you're someone like you, where you get told whether you're 20 or 30 or 40, time to hang it up.
Right.
But that process happens mentally for a lot of these guys a lot quicker with how quickly
Right.
they're thrust into these positions.
And so here's the other piece. You can't, and they fired Brandon Hyde, by the way. So that, but you can't get yourself out of that a lot of times because no one around you is there to help you because everybody else is trying to find their own life raft. That's where you have to have coaches and managers who recognize who aren't walking around worrying about job security, but instead are trying to make life better for the players in uniform. So anyway, all right. Well, that's it for today. We have we're gonna do our teammate trivia.
Yeah, we got some trivia. We got a question for you.
We got a question.
We'll leave with the question. Question comes from Sam McCasey on YouTube. Why do teams put their best hitters in the 2-hole now? What do you think that's for?
Well, I'm not sure that's. I might argue the premise a little bit. I don't think
you
that.
see it more and more now.
Right.
Whereas traditionally that was more of a contact.
Yeah. And a lot of times in the old days, you had 2 hitters. Not when I was playing. People really had changed at that point, but like you had 2 hitters in the 70s who were hitting 244, but they didn't strike out. The idea behind having your top 3 hitters be your best hitters has always been because of you want to guarantee them 3 at-bats, right? And when the second you get an extra base runner, your #1 hitter hits a 4th time, So generally the top of your lineup is the The top 4 or 5 guys are going to see 4 at bats most nights. But I think sabermetrics has had a massive impact on that. In the sense, I can tell you this: sabermetrics is the only reason Kyle Schwarber was hitting leadoff for the Phillies.
Yeah.
Because, if you go back to the conventional school, it was, I need Vince Coleman. Well, Vince Coleman had a 300 on base percentage. Well, I don't care how fast Vince Coleman is. If he's not on base, his speed's irrelevant. And with the lack of stealing in the game, the lack of base running, motivating the top of your lineup, Kyle Schwarber is a perfect example of a leadoff. He's on 45% of the time, which means the guy hitting behind him needs to be a productive offensive player.
I believe they do Trey Turner most of the time.
I think, isn't it Mookie Betts with the Dodgers?
I was just about to say that.
Freeman?
Connie, Betts. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas traditionally, like in your era, Mookie Betts would have been a leadoff hitter.
Right.
And was a leadoff hitter for a long time.
Right. And the Mets can really go Freeman, Ohtani, Betts in whatever order they want, because all 3 of those guys are on base percentage guys.
Yeah.
So, you can mix and mess with the hot hand. The question becomes, when you're building a lineup, you put your 2 hitter, your best hitter at 2, because you have a stud at 3 and you can't pitch around the 2, right? It was always the Manny David thing. Well, Manny hit in front of David because you could, or vice versa, because you couldn't pitch. You didn't want to face the guy behind him. That takes a deeper lineup. That takes a lineup that, it didn't matter when Barry Bonds was Barry Bonds. It didn't matter who. It could have been Stan Musial hitting behind him, or Rod Carew, or Tony Gwynn. You would walk Barry to face whoever, because no one was as good as Barry Bonds. That doesn't happen a lot, but that's why you see the duos, Gehrig and Ruth, Mantle and Maris, Ortiz and Ramirez, Albert Bell and Jim Thome. You go on and on, but that's why they're always kind of linked together, because one of them protects the other one, right? That was the big thing in New York last year with Soto and Judge, right? Soto had a monster year, and Soto's he's going to have a monster anyway. But hitting in front of Aaron Judge, now, okay, the ball 4 is not really a lucrative thing anymore, which I think was a monstrous reason that New York is where they are, because of Pete Alonso's adjustment. If Pete Alonso's going to strike out 185, 95, 215 times, then okay, I'm going to pitch around Soto. And let's be clear, there's 2, if you're a fan of baseball, there are 2 kinds of intentional walks. Nowadays, you're going to see the 4-pitch intentional walk and the free pass now, because pitchers don't have the command to unintentionally intentional walk. And by that, I mean, I had very few intentional walks in my career, but I had a lot of at-bats where I was okay with the intentional walk, and I could command the ball around the strike zone to tease. And there were a lot of times where I would unintentionally pitch to a guy and get an out that I wasn't really worried about walking, because when you have guys on the mound who don't command their fastballs, you can't pitch around people with them. You just have to put them on. And it's a weapon you take away from a good pitcher. And so not all intentional walks are created equal or obvious. So good question.
And then I just had a quick piece of fun trivia that I saw over the weekend that I figured people would like. Who is the only player in Yankees and Mets history to hit 90 home runs for both clubs? Because there's a lot that...
Right, it's not Ricky Henderson.
No. But there's a lot that have played for both, and I was watching, like, it was one of these posts where you see a couple people answer it, and every one of these guesses, I'm like, oh, nope, that wasn't it.
It's not John Allrood.
John Allrood.
Not Reggie Jackson.
Not Reggie Jackson.
Is it Darryl Strawberry?
It is not Darryl Strawberry. Not enough for the Yankees. You want a hint?
Yeah.
You share a name with the guy.
No way. Not Curtis Granderson.
Curtis Granderson.
Really?
Only player in Major League history to hit 90 home runs for the Yankees. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Because you'd think there's like,
and
like
yeah,
Carlos Beltran was the guest I heard that. I was like, oh, that's it. That's got to be it. And it wasn't. I was like, all right, then who is it? Like, I have genuinely no
yeah,
idea.
yeah, very
Yeah.
underrated player too. And I heard,
Very underrated player. Because then that, obviously, I went back and looked at his stats after that, and I was like, God, this guy. And I remember him as a Tiger first and foremost because he burst onto the scene and he was awesome.
what kind of career numbers did he end up with?
I'm looking at it now. He played 16 seasons
Yep.
in Major League Baseball, and he was a career 250 hitter. But some of these years that he was playing for the Yankees and some of the years for the Tigers, he was unbelievable. 23 triples in 2007,
Yeah,
119 RBIs in 2011. He just had some insane.
he was a guy who they always wanted to be a leadoff hitter because he could run, but he swung and missed too much.
Yeah, he had a bunch of big strikeouts.
Yeah.
Fun fact that if you want to get some.
I heard that he might have been the kindest, nicest player to ever play the game.
Yeah, one of the things that like you never heard a word about, which says so much about athletes. If you don't hear anything about the guy, that usually means they're like a pretty good person. They're kept to themselves, whatever.
Yeah, always heard he was the kindest guy and just wicked talented. So
yeah, and fun to watch play.
Yeah.
Okay, so guess your teammate. All
Right.
right. Last week we had last episode we had Greg Jeffries.
It's been Council, Lieberthal, Jeffries.
So tonight, as you guys know by now, we go from hardest and most vague clue all the way down through 5 clues to the deadest giveaway. So starting with the 10-point clue, I played 13 seasons for 7 MLB franchises.
You say that again. Played how many seasons?
13 seasons.
Okay.
For 7 MLB franchises.
Okay.
Any guesses?
Mario Duncan. No,
No.
he didn't play longer than that.
The 8-point clue. I am tied at 100th all time with 363 career stolen bases. #100th on the dot all time.
7 teams. 13 years.
363.
Yeah, that's a lot.
100th all time. That didn't seem like a lot, but 100th all time.
That's
100th all time.
Right.
That's a lot.
Right. Over 20,000 players.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it's going to be an outfielder or a middle infielder. I'm going to say 7 big league teams. That eliminates Dykstra. That eliminates Finley, Anderson. Devereaux didn't steal that name. Gerald Young?
Nope. I am a rare teammate because we have been teammates for a World Series win and an opposing. Hang on, I worded that one. I'm a rare teammate because we have been teammates for a World Series victory and enemies for a World Series.
The first name that jumped out was Scott Rowland.
Is that your guess?
No, because it's not Scott Rowland because he didn't play for 7 teams. So it would have had to, it's not, I don't believe it's any of, I'm pretty sure it's none of the Blue Jays. And then it would have to be the Yankees. He was a teammate of mine, and I played against him. The Yankees, the Rockies. No.
Shot clock.
Okay, no.
No guess?
No.
Okay. In 1997, I made my only All-Star team and led the National League in steals.
Oh, wow. It's not Milt Thompson. Oh, this one's gonna kill me when I
I'll add a little addendum to the end of that. I also went on to lead the NL in steals in 1998 and 1999. So 3 straight years. I was the National League stolen bases leader in the late
I
90s.
should know this now, easily.
Yep.
Oh, this is gonna,
This one's gonna bother you, I
yeah,
promise.
it is.
If it's not already.
The 7 teams is the one really screwing me up.
Yeah.
It's not Steve Finley, it's not Gonzalez. It's not, so 97 he made an all-star team. Who did that? I should know.
And this will be one like it
It's not Ron Gant.
is not Ron Gant.
Okay.
Like your final clue.
Yeah.
In my 13 years in Major League Baseball, I had 2 separate 5-year stints, one with the Diamondbacks and one with the Pirates. Oh, this guy's gonna be so mad if he ever sees you didn't get this.
5-year stint with the Diamondbacks and the Pirates.
In a 13-year career. So now if you do that math, the 7 teams, that was a little bit of a smoke screen. He had a cup of coffee in a couple of places.
It's not me, Drake Cummings. Oh my God.
Specifically, he played 9 games for one team. He played 40 games for one team.
5 years with the Pirates.
Played 108 games for one
Sure as
team.
hell ain't J Bell. It's not Jose Guillen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this is absolutely
This
killing.
is as bad as the worst one yet. Because you're going so deep in your bag, now.
Right.
Like he is an integral part of both of the teams that
Right.
he was on the World Series in.
And it's going to be so blatantly obvious.
Starter on both teams.
Right. Not Ben Slike.
I'm enjoying this so much.
Oh my God, this is killing me. Killing me. There's a name I can't come up with not Milt Thompson. Led the league in stolen bases 3. I mean, I would know that. I know that. Wow, this one shouldn't get
Do you
me.
want another hint, a bonus hint?
All right.
You and his wife are big fans of each other.
Oh my God. Oh my God, Tony Womack.
Yep.
Oh
Tony
my
Womack.
God.
Isn't that great?
Oh,
13 seasons for 7 MLB teams.
that one screwed me.
A rare teammate because I was on your team
Right.
in 2001 and against you in 2004 with the Cardinals.
Yep.
I am tied in 100th all time with 363 stolen bases in 1997.
That was I couldn't get the name.
All-Star team.
I never once thought of his name. I couldn't
Yeah.
get his name because I was thinking middle infielder, outfielder.
Once I led the NL in steals in those
Yeah.
years, I thought for sure you were gonna get it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that was
That was just brain block.
yeah.
That's why these are fun. I knew you would get.
No, that wasn't
Where
fun.
your
That
name is
pissed
Jay
me
Bell
off.
and you can't think of Tony Womack. That's how I
Right.
knew I have you in a mental press.
Right. No, I that was the name I couldn't come up with because that's just so blatantly obvious when the Pirate Diamondback thing comes up.
And I was happy there was a couple like Mike Timlin types so that playing against in the World Series and
Right.
on your team
Right.
type thing wouldn't
Well,
get away dead
No,
away.
screw that. That sucked.
That was great.
All right. Hey guys, we'll be back on Tuesday for episode 19. We'll start hopefully start talking about the draft unless something amazing comes up between now and then.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Take care,
Catch you
buddy.
next time.